Good evening to all of you. My name is Kumar. I'm the founding Vice-Chancellor of OP Jindal Global University. I have great pleasure in welcoming all of you in India and around the world to the Founders Day lecture at the valedictory session of the 2 days conference that we just concluded on reimagining and transforming the university. I would like to particularly extend a warm welcome to our founding Chancellor and benefactor of OP Jindal Global University, Mr. NAVEEN Jindal, Dr. JOANNA, NEWMAN, the Chief Executive and Secretary General of our partnering organization, Association of Commonwealth Universities, and the chief guest of this evening's program, Professor Dr. Richard LEVIN, President Emeritus, Yale University, and my colleague, Professor SRIDHAR, PATNAIK, Registrar, OP Jindal Global University. Today is a very special day for us. We are indeed celebrating the Founders Day in recognition of the contribution of Sri Om Prakash Jindal. We will be celebrating his contribution a bit later as well, and we will come back to that at that moment. This conference that we just concluded has been part of an effort to bring collective consciousness towards the challenges facing the higher education system. The commencement of this conference was elevated by the presence of Honorable Union Cabinet Minister for Education, Dr. Ramesh Pokhriyal Nishank, who inaugurated this conference in the esteemed presence of Professor D.P. Singh, Chairman, University Grants Commission, Professor Pankaj Mittal, Secretary General of the Association of Indian Universities. The conference is also graced by the presence of eminent leaders representing all major Indian regulatory organizations, including the University Grants Commission, the National Accreditation and Assessment Council, the All India Council for Technical Education, as well as the Association of Indian Universities. Last 2 days have been truly thought-provoking. While we started yesterday at the crack of dawn in the West, the intellectual deliberations across the day went on till midnight to welcome the rising sun in the East, and across the conference, we've had 36 hours of live streaming. It has been our objective to create an intellectual space and knowledge with a global view and living through multiple time zones across 2 days of invigorating experience of dialogues. This included viewers from across 75 countries around the world, right from Afghanistan to Japan, to Iraq, to Panama, to Brazil, to United States. We've had over 3,000 registered viewers coming in to watch this conference from every continent, barring Antarctica. To be able to create a forum and knowledge center which could benefit such a diverse and dispersed group of stakeholders of higher education across the world has indeed allowed us to realize the vision we had when we first conceptualized the event under the aegis of the International Center for Higher Education, Research and Capacity Building at JGU. We must express our deep gratitude to our global education network partners who enabled us in accomplishing this goal: Association of Commonwealth Universities, Association of Indian Universities, Coimbra Group of Brazilian Universities, LASPAO, Harvard University Affiliated Network, the Star Scholars Network, and the Qatar Foundation. Across 15 thematic sessions, 2 special dialogues, and some very special keynote addresses, we witnessed the innovation and imagination of over 80 thought leaders of higher education who represented over 55 universities and colleges. Nearly 40 present and former vice-chancellors, provosts, rectors, presidents, founding deans, and directors joined us to contribute to some very meaningful discussion. I am very delighted that this event is culminated by the valedictory session, but most importantly, the Founders Day lecture to be delivered by President Richard LEVIN. Let me introduce our distinguished dignitaries who are present on this occasion. As I mentioned earlier, we are celebrating and marking the occasion of the Founders Day of Sri Om Prakash Jindal, whose contribution to nation building was outstanding and truly inspiring. He made immense contributions to business, society, politics, governance, and philanthropy. Let me move ahead and quickly introduce our distinguished guests. Professor Richard LEVIN recently stepped down as Chief Executive Officer of Coursera, which provides open online education from 150 top universities to 26 million registered learners worldwide. He continues as a senior advisor to his successor. In 2013, President LEVIN completed a 20-year term as the president of Yale University, during which time he rebuilt the campus, redeveloped downtown New Haven, co-founded Yale-NUS College, and generally strengthened the university's international programs. He's the Frederick William Belknap Professor of Economics Emeritus. Professor LEVIN has served on President Obama's Council of Advisors for Science and Technology. Professor LEVIN earned a BA in History at Stanford University, a B.Lit in Politics at Oxford University, a PhD in Economics at Yale University. He holds honorary doctorates from Harvard, Princeton, Yale, Oxford, and Peking universities. Thank you, President LEVIN, for agreeing to deliver the Founders Day lecture and to be part of this special occasion.
Thank you.
Let me take a moment to introduce Dr. Joanna Newman. Dr. Joanna Newman is an MBE, FRSA, is the Chief Executive and Secretary General of the Association of Commonwealth Universities. She joined the ACU in April 2017 and is responsible for fostering and promoting the aims of the ACU as defined by its membership in developing inter-Commonwealth relations in the field of higher education. Before joining the ACU, Joanna was the Vice Principal International at King's College London, where she was responsible for all international matters for the university. Joanna is a Senior Research Fellow in the History Faculty at King's and an Honorary Research Fellow at the University of Southampton and has taught history at University College London and the University of Warwick. In 2014, she was honored as a member of the Order of the British Empire MBE in recognition of our work promoting British higher education internationally. Thank you very much, Joanna, for your presence. I have great pleasure in particularly welcoming our founding Chancellor and benefactor, Mr. NAVEEN Jindal. Mr. NAVEEN Jindal is the founding Chancellor of OP Jindal Global University and the Chairman of Jindal Steel and Power Limited. Mr. Jindal holds an MBA degree from the University of Texas at Dallas, United States. After completing his education, he returned to India and started contributing to the growth of his organization. Mr. Jindal's idea of building the nation of his dreams inspired him to commit himself towards making in India. The spirit of innovation and the dream of using what is known as Swadeshi raw materials, which is largely from India, aided the success of the story of JSPL under his able leadership. Mr. Jindal also undertook the citizens' right to display the national flag with respect, dignity, and honor. His spirit of nationalism was truly rewarded after a decade when the Supreme Court of India delivered a historic judgment which allowed every Indian to hoist the Indian flag with pride. As a part of his philanthropic initiative, Mr. NAVEEN Jindal founded the OP Jindal Global University in memory of his father, Mr. OP Jindal, in 2009 with a deep desire to ensure quality education to build a strong foundation for the future of India. Mr. Jindal is an acclaimed shooter and an avid polo player. Lastly, today is also a very special occasion. Every year on 7th August, we also celebrate our convocation. We congratulate and greet the students who graduate from OP Jindal Global University. Unfortunately, this could not have taken place today. So I would like to take this moment to congratulate the over 1,100 students who have graduated from OP Global University across all schools, and to greet them and to congratulate them and their parents and their family members for their achievements. I am sure this moment which they have gone through during the COVID-19 will also ensure that they will have a greater sense of resilience as they look at their future as well. With those words, I would like to now invite Dr. Joanna Newman to deliver her presidential address.
Thank you so much. And it is my great pleasure to be delivering the presidential address today at the Global Virtual Conference on Reimagining and Transforming the University, organised by OP Jindal Global, alongside the Honourable Chancellor, Mr. NAVEEN Jindal, and Professor Richard Levin, President Emeritus of Yale University. I've had the great pleasure of knowing Professor Raj Kumar for many years now, and I'm absolutely delighted that he has taken on the responsibility of chairing the ACU's East Asia Regional Committee, which comprises university leaders from India, Malaysia, and Hong Kong, and will help shape our priorities in the region going forward. I've enjoyed several visits to your beautiful campus just outside Delhi, where I've had an opportunity to spend some memorable times engaging with faculty and with students, both during my time as Vice Principal at King's, working for Universities UK, and now in my current role at the Association of Commonwealth Universities, and I look forward very much to returning there. As the Indian government's new national education policy takes shape, I'm also confident that Jindal, with its stellar reputation in law, the humanities, and a range of other areas, will play a leading role in helping to shape the nation's higher education ecosystem, especially in areas of internationalization and international collaboration. Most recently, just before lockdown in February, ACU colleagues spent a few wonderful days at Jindal, along with a group of 40 students from 15 different Commonwealth countries, as part of our Commonwealth Futures series, which saw workshops on the theme of social cohesion, organised in the UK, in India, and in South Africa, with locations chosen to mark the 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi, whose teachings and principles inspired the Development Commonwealth Futures series, and indeed so much of our work at the ACU. Outcomes from the deliberations of these Commonwealth Youth Forums will be submitted to the Youth Forum at the Rwanda, the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting when it reconvenes next, we hope next year. We are a network of over 500 universities in 53 Commonwealth countries, and India has always been a strong partner in our mission, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later on today. We have 161 member universities in India, our highest number for any one country, and this list includes many of the leading institutions in the land. 5 of our founding members are in India, including the universities of Delhi and Mumbai. In terms of governance, 2 of our council members currently are from India, and it was wonderful to hear earlier comments today from Dr. Rhonda Lenton of York University in Canada, and who's also an ACU council member. We have actually heard over the last couple of days fascinating comments and opinions from over 80 thought leaders from 15 countries, 55 universities, and Professor Kumar is to be congratulated for putting together such an important conference at such a time of crisis and opportunity. As an organisation at the ACU dedicated to improving lives through education, it's an honour to be involved with this conference, which touches upon such diverse and important themes ranging from institutional resilience, emotional well-being, quality assurance, international mobility, from social impact to the future of online learning and teaching, from women's leadership to the future of universities post-COVID-19. Our mission is to build a better world through higher education. There isn't a single one of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that can be reached without the essential contribution of universities, whether it is through cutting-edge research, applied research, creating globally aware citizens, or creating pedagogy that is taught in primary schools and teaching teachers. Universities have an essential role to play, and we feel that organisations like the ACU have an essential role in pressing that case at the UN level and also levels with Commonwealth Heads of Government. There is a transformative power in higher education for individuals, for communities and for nations, and all of our work is testimony to this mission. And we also believe that international collaboration, exchange and mobility in higher education is essential. And if nothing else, COVID-19 has shown us that it is more important now than ever, and something that universities like OP Jindal and many others across India have demonstrated so successfully over recent years. Understandably, a lot has been said about India's new national education policy, which we believe has the power to transform India's development over the coming decades. I'd like to take this opportunity to highlight some aspects that appeal as an organisation to the ACU, an organisation that is significantly invested in India, and also significantly invested in India taking a leading role in Commonwealth priorities and Commonwealth governmental initiatives. Let me begin by complimenting the policy's promotion of multidisciplinarity and holistic undergraduate education with combinations of subjects and flexible curricula. The recommendation that undergraduate education should be 4 years whilst retaining the 3-year option with multiple exit options and certifications for those who complete 1 or 2 years is also really welcome. Remaining with the topic of flexibility, the introduction of the academic bank of credits will enable students to store credits and enjoy much needed flexibility to rejoin their programs after voluntary or indeed forced breaks due to personal circumstances. And this is particularly true during COVID. Third, the government's promise of light but tight regulation and the establishment of the Higher Education Commission of India as a single overarching regulatory body for the entire HE system, with 4 independent verticals: National Higher Education Regulatory Council for Regulation, the General Education Council for Standard Setting, Higher Education Grants Council for Funding, and the National Accreditation Council is also a welcome move. As someone who was on the India-UK Joint Recognition Board for many years, I recognise this, this improvement and this move towards a simplification of how accreditation is organised across Indian higher education. Given the size of India's higher education ecosystem, its implementation will be key to its success, and inspiration can be drawn from many case studies in different parts of the world. And again, this is where I think the ACU's university network can be of help. The establishment, fourthly, of the National Research Foundation will bring all funding and mentoring research initiatives in the country under a single funder, and this again is welcomed. It will, in theory, foster a stronger research culture and will contribute in building up research capacity across higher education in India. We hope this important move will help in building up India's knowledge economy and lead to the amplification of locally developed technologies, whilst also making it more convenient to engage with the international research community. Finally, we are particularly appreciative of the Indian government's efforts in encouraging stronger international partnerships. This will not only help further India's position as a major knowledge hub, but it will also attract more international students and will play a role in helping achieve the ambitious gross enrollment ration targets set by the NEP. It's particularly heartening to see the Indian government take a pro-globalization approach at a difficult and uncertain time for the global community. Furthermore, we believe the development of strong partnerships between Indian and global universities will not only strengthen opportunities for collaboration that will help India, but will also provide the world with an opportunity to learn from India in a number of areas. The ACU believes in the power of international collaboration and mobility to create stronger, more vibrant higher education systems and to build lasting connections and create opportunities for individuals and societies. Whilst the traditional model of internationalization has been severely disrupted by the COVID-19 pandemic, it's also led to enormous innovation in higher education and a move to online that has happened in a more rapid way. Not least though, with its own challenges. And one of the areas that the ACU will be working on in the next few years is the digital divide that divides the university's capacity to be able to create those online opportunities within countries as well as across the Commonwealth. And this is something we will be working on. We have found new ways to make and maintain international links, sometimes better than we had before. New ways to continue working together, learning from each other and driving the higher education sector and society forward, also through its partnerships with industry and with the third sector. The pandemic has provided us with an opportunity amongst the many challenges to reimagine and transform the university. And this conference is a timely forum to reflect on this opportunity and on our collective responsibility to ensure that universities are able to play their full part in delivering a brighter future for us all. Thank you very much, and I wish you all success with the rest of the conference.
Thank you very much, Joanna, for your comprehensive tour de force on the evolution of ACU as well as its contribution and presence across different parts of the world. Now we will move into an important part of the program, which is we have a short film on the life and contribution of Mr. Om Prakash Jindal. I request our IT staff to begin the film.
It was the dream of Shri Om Prakash Jindal that laid the foundation of the $12 billion Jindal Group, a name that in the last 5 decades has become one of India's most dynamic and respected organizations. Shri O.P. Jindal's monumental journey began in a small village in Haryana. A farmer's son with technology on his mind, it was a small incident that changed the course of his destiny. One day, he found a pipe that had "Made in England" written on it. These 3 words compelled Shri O.P. Jindal to think, why couldn't these pipes be manufactured in India? With just a little experience in trading in steel and no formal training in engineering, Shri O.P. Jindal started a pipe unit in 1952 with an investment of only 42,000 rupees.
क्योंकि जिंदल साहब असल में इंजीनियर नहीं थे, लेकिन इंजीनियर से भी ज़्यादा उनको अनुभव था.
All the machinery for the unit was indigenously developed by Shri O.P. Jindal himself.
मैं ऐसा जी मिस्त्री जो है ना कारीगर, जो प्रैक्टिकल कारीगर है, मैं उसकी राय ज़्यादा मानता हूँ, इंजीनियर की कम मानता हूँ. जिसने हाथ से काम किया है 10 साल 5 साल है, तो उनको बिठा लेता हूँ मैं.
A visionary par excellence, Shri O.P. Jindal laid the foundation of his memorable journey with the single unit plant in Hisar and followed it with Jindal Strips Limited. This was just the beginning of a company that has today transformed into a multi-product global steel conglomerate. Spreading Shri O.P. Jindal's vision to every corner of the world are his 4 sons, Shri Prithviraj Jindal, Shri Sajjan Jindal, Shri Ratan Jindal and Shri NAVEEN Jindal.
शुरू से उनका एक ही होता था कि मेरा परिवार जो है आपस में मिलकर प्यार से रहे, और मेरी कोशिश यही है कि मैं उनके परिवार को, अपने परिवार को प्यार से इकट्ठा रखूं।
Fueled by the passion of their father, the four pillars stand united to make the Jindal Group the best in the business by building on their core strengths.
I could only do it because I knew, he was there guiding me. He was, he was the inspiration. I took all the courage from him, because he's always taught us that, okay, we should never we should always fight against injustice, and it could be anybody.
The man who was instrumental in securing every Indian the right to fly the national flag with dignity, Shri NAVEEN Jindal, is much more than a businessman or a member of parliament. Revolutionizing JSPL from a moderately performing company into a powerhouse in the steel sector, Shri NAVEEN Jindal consolidated JSPL's position across steel, power, mining and infrastructure sectors. A national record holder in skeet shooting and a proficient polo player, Shri NAVEEN Jindal mirrors his father's ideology of following the best practices in business management and politics. More than mere excellence in business, each unit of the group is driven by a socially conscious corporate philosophy that is inspired by Shri O.P. Jindal. He was a social reformer whose life's mission was to help the common man in every possible way.
अगर समाज सेवा करनी हो तो राजनीति से बढ़िया कोई माध्यम नहीं है.
A confidant and companion of Shri O.P. Jindal, Srimati Savitri Jindal is much more than the chairperson of the $12 billion Jindal Group. The former Minister of State for Revenue and Housing in the Haryana government, Srimati Savitri Jindal is acknowledged and widely appreciated by senior politicians and the media for her relentless efforts in her constituency and society. Srimati Savitri Jindal continues to be the torchbearer who inspires the group to uphold Shri O.P. Jindal's values of inclusive growth and social reforms.
इस हार की जनता तो जिंदल साहब को बहुत ज़्यादा प्यार करती थी और प्यार करती रहेगी. तो मैं भी जो सपने जिंदल साहब ने देखे थे उन्हीं को पूरा करने में लगी हुई हूँ.
Choosing remote areas to set up industry, Shri O.P. Jindal adopted a large number of villages and contributed to the development of the region in a more holistic way. Jindal industrial townships have health and education facilities, not only for employees, but also people living in nearby areas. It is this very vision of Shri O.P. Jindal that lives on in the form of superior services being provided by hospitals, schools, charitable trusts, foundations, and numerous other philanthropic endeavors.
My main inspiration and guiding light in life has been my father. He used to say that education and health are the best gifts that anyone can give to anyone.
A life that trailblazed the nation's industrial growth. A life that exemplified growth for everyone. An inspiration not only for the group but the entire society. Shri O.P. Jindal's life realized a dream that enriches the lives of millions across the globe.
All right, thank you very much. Let me now have the pleasure and privilege to invite our founding chancellor and benefactor, Mr. NAVEEN Jindal, to deliver a speech.
Thank you very much, Raj. Namaskar, everyone. Dr. JOANNA NEWMAN, Chief Executive and Secretary General, Association of Commonwealth Universities. Professor Dr. Richard LEVIN, President Emeritus, Yale University. Our Vice-Chancellor, Dr. KUMAR, Registrar, Professor PATNAIK, other distinguished guests from India and overseas, faculty and dear students. It gives me immense pleasure to be here today in the presence of such esteemed and distinguished leaders of higher education from across the world. Over a decade ago, we had a vision to honor the memory of my father, Shri O.P. Jindal, by contributing to institution building in India. He worked hard for the cause of India's development and social philanthropy. As a tribute to the contributions made by my father, we wanted to create an institution which gives the students in India an opportunity to experience world-class education. My inspiration and guiding light in life has been my father. He used to say, what I said even earlier, that education is the greatest gift that one can give to anyone. And definitely quality higher education contributes to economic development and human development of a nation. Today is a very special day for me and my family. Today is my father's 90th birth anniversary. On this day, the convocation of JGU is convened every year, but due to the extraordinary circumstances this year, we could not host the convocation. But we are really happy to learn that over 1,000 students graduated from our university today. I wish them all success. And congratulations to their parents, family members, and friends. This day will forever be etched in your memory as an unforgettable day. Hope all of you will make us proud in the future with your wonderful contributions to the society and the world at large. In this age of sustainable development, when global challenges such as pandemics, climate change, global terrorism, overconsumption, etc., are threatening life and livelihood on our planet, young people like you need to be more aware of all these issues and challenges and work tirelessly to contribute to peace and sustainability. I would like to once again congratulate our students who are graduating on this special day. May you enjoy whatever you do, and may you be successful in life. We look forward to hearing about your achievements and accomplishments. Go forward, Jindalites, and make new opportunities for yourself and others. It is a wonderful tribute to the legacy of my father that this conference has brought together such accomplished thought leaders from across the globe to discuss the reimagination and transformation of the future of universities. My special gratitude to Professor Dr. Richard Levin for accepting to deliver the Founders Day lecture. I'm indeed grateful to each one of you for sharing this moment and making it so memorable for us. My father, you just saw the video. My father committed his life to the development of our nation, furthering the mission of education and driving social change through philanthropy. OP Jindal Global University was founded to carry forward his legacy. It fills me with great pride to say that today, all of our collective efforts have culminated into JGU being honored with the recognition as an institution of eminence by the University Grants Commission and the Ministry of Education, Government of India. We are grateful to them that our efforts and accomplishments were considered deserving of this honor. This indeed gives us the impetus to keep growing and evolving and to further the vision of our university, to contribute meaningfully to building the future of India and that of the world. This year, we were also extremely humbled by the recognition of JGU as India's leading private university and being ranked among the top 700 universities in the world by the prestigious QS World University Rankings. To achieve this global recognition for a university which has just crossed the 10-year mark is no easy feat. And I would like to commend Vice-Chancellor Rajkumar and a wonderful team at JGU for having relentlessly worked hard all these years to realize this vision. Unfortunately, 2020 has also presented us with one of the most unprecedented crises of our times. While human lives have been the biggest price paid during this pandemic, one also cannot discount the socio-economic impact of the pandemic on the nations worldwide. Higher education institutions have felt the responsibility of putting together their intellectual capital to redefine the future of the world. They have also been challenged by the constraints of nationwide lockdowns. At Jindal, we wanted to ensure that we fulfilled our commitment to our students, and we responded swiftly to resume classes online within a few weeks of the lockdown extension being announced. Our teams responded to ensure a seamless transition to online learning, which allowed JGU to undertake the desired digital transformation in a very short span of time. This pandemic has yet again made us realize what a volatile and uncertain world we live in, and yet has given us an opportunity to rethink our education system. I believe that if we align our efforts, knowledge, and intellectual capital, we will be able to use this time as an opportunity to innovate for a better future. As a driver of socioeconomic development, higher education is important, not only for the creation of competitive talent of a nation and reaping its demographic dividend, but also to bring reforms and sometimes even revolutionize the way we live. In fact, we are perhaps living in one of those times today. I believe that we must inspire the youth of our world to not just become responsible citizens, but also become change makers and leaders of the world, changing global landscape for a stronger and better future. We are extremely grateful to all our education network partners and all our distinguished speakers who have been instruments of change worldwide. We are really grateful to them for having taken the time to be part of this forum. We truly look forward to continued collaborations to building a better tomorrow for the world through higher education. We would like to particularly thank Professor Richard Levin for his inspiration, encouragement, and support to JGU all these years. As a proud parent of two young adults who went to Yale as undergraduate students, we are really honored that we have President Levin deliver the Founders Day lecture today. We all know that President Levin served as the distinguished president of Yale for over 2 decades. Finally, I'm confident that under the able leadership of our Vice-Chancellor, Dr. Rajkumar, and our very committed faculty, Jindal Global University will continue to take forward the legacy of my father and always live up to its commitment to ensure constant evolution, transformation, and reimagination of universities across the globe, and advance the vision of creating a change worldwide through higher education. Thank you. Jai Hind.
Thank you very much, Chancellor Mr. Jindal, for that really thought-provoking and inspiring address. I deeply appreciate your presence and the fact that you took out time from your busy schedule to be part of this valedictory session. Let me now invite our chief guest for this evening, Professor Dr. Richard Levin, to President Emeritus of Yale University, to deliver the Founders Day lecture and the keynote address. I want to tell that President Levin believed in OP Jindal Global University long before the world discovered us. I remain grateful to you for betting on us long before everybody else. Over to you, Rick.
Well, thank you very much, Raj, and thank you so much, Mr. Jindal, Chancellor Jindal, for your warm words. It's true, I was involved with OP Jindal University literally from the very beginning. I think it was 10 years ago that I first visited and was inspired by the terrific work that is being done and the forethought and planning that was underway to turn this institution into something special. And it is truly remarkable that after only 10 years, that this institution has achieved institution of eminent standing in India, which is a wonderful signal for a very promising future. I'm going to talk today about the conference theme itself, reimagining and transforming the university at a general level. And while this talk is pitched and aimed primarily to leaders in higher education who are among the attendees, to the extent that there are in the audience also some of those who are graduating today and their families, I want to say that there is quite a bit in this talk about general lessons for leadership that would serve equally well in any sector. I'm focused, of course, on higher education, but I think there's some general application. Let me take a moment to share my screen with you all. I'm going to use some slides. The plan of this talk is first to talk about some general principles for reimagining and transforming a university, but in truth, any institution. What are the general principles of leadership you need to make change in a complex organization that requires working with many different constituencies? And then I'll talk about a case study, really, of a transformation that I would say what was accomplished during my tenure as president of Yale, which was the internationalization of the university. Then I'll turn very briefly at the end to a transformation that is in progress today, and I believe that's been mentioned already a couple of times in Dr. Newman's talk and Vice Chancellor Kumar's, but the opportunities that online education presents for the future of the university. So first, let me talk about leadership guidelines in general for reimagining and transforming the university. So I'm going to articulate 5 principles that I think are important to actually moving an institution forward. The first, you will find this in virtually all leadership books, but the first is to articulate a vision. Actually, if you look at experience of universities, this is often the weakest link, because leaders of universities, because of shared governance, are often unwilling to stake out something ambitious that is deliberately labeled as their own vision. But to really move an institution forward, I think the leader needs a clear vision and needs to communicate it often. Otherwise, inertia will prevail. Universities are very conservative institutions. Faculties in general prefer the status quo to any alternative. And surprisingly, students often are even more conservative than faculty. And so moving an institution forward is hard. It takes a lot of communication, but it requires a vision that eventually can be subscribed to by the majority of the institution's participants. And I say something a little harsh here perhaps, but if a vice chancellor has no vision, she's in the wrong job because otherwise the vice chancellor is merely a caretaker. I would point only to Dr. Kumar for the extraordinary leadership he's given to JGU. He had a vision. He outlined a vision for me more than 10 years ago, school by school, the timeline, how he was going to do it, what the strategy was, and he stuck to it, and he's achieved great success. The second principle is to translate the vision into ambitious but achievable goals. Now, both those adjectives are important. Ambitious is important because if your goals aren't ambitious, they won't inspire anyone. If you want to bring people along, you need something in the vision that makes people feel this is truly aspirational. This is something we would all hope to achieve to make ourselves better. But the other adjective, achievable, is important as well. If it's too far away, if the vision is something that it's very hard to imagine the institution could actually do, that won't work either. So you need to strike this nice balance between ambition and practical, the ideal and the practical. Then the next task is essentially to identify the major goals that, if achieved, will realize the vision. So the vision might be, I'll come up with a case later, but might be something rather abstract. Be an institution of eminence, for example, could have been a goal 10 years ago for JGU. But the goals had to be more concrete. The goals have to be, found a law school and build its faculty and attract a great student body, or as one of the major goals. In identifying the goals, this is the point at which the shared governance prevails, and one has to bring in conversations with deans and faculty in order to hear, for the leader to hear their aspirations and understand where they would like to go. Typically, deans and faculty will be more parochial than the vice chancellor or president because they will be concerned with preserving the strength of their own unit, their own part of the university. So it's very important not to let some sort of consensus process defeat the imagination that will take the institution to the next level. The third step, having settled on both a vision and long-term goals is to develop and communicate a strategy. Now, strategy in general is the path to long-term goals. Strategy is the relationship between means and ends. It's the process by which one gets from here to what one has envisioned. And the standard way to do that is to set milestones to mark the way. The way that I've found useful in my experience is to consult widely with faculty and leaders, and with issues about student well-being, students as well, and to formulate a multi-year plan, not as far out as the long-term goals. Long-term goals I usually think of as 10-year horizon, something on that order. Formulate a 3 or a 4-year plan and communicate that. And then it's also very important, if you want to move an institution forward, very important to have a process by which there's goal setting every year by all the members of the leaders' teams, by the officers and by the deans and by department chairs. Everyone should have a set of goals to accomplish in that year. And the goals need to be consistent with each other and with the long-term vision of the university. We had a process for ensuring that at Yale. The fourth principle, after developing the strategy, is meticulous execution, careful execution, hitting every step along the way. The best way to achieve execution I've found in a university is to assign responsibility to a single senior leader with the bandwidth to take on the challenge. This is unusual, actually, in a university structure. Typically, the provost might be assigned the responsibility for executing the strategic vision. I don't think that works. The provost has too much to do. So if you have a particular vision that's going to move the institution forward in some dimension, say online education, say internationalization, it's best to empower someone else who reports directly to the leader, who has the time to really spend more or less full time on the project. You have to be realistic. You don't want to do too much at once. And all through this process of execution, even as you're implementing, you need to continue to take input from the community. But in the end, only you, the leader, and perhaps with your deputy, who is responsible for this initiative, only you can ensure that actions move toward the vision. Again, the entropy within a university is great, and there's a great tendency for things to revert to the status quo. So you have to be careful to make sure that even though you're listening, you're still moving forward. And then the final principle is stay flexible and don't think of your plan as rigid, and be able to seize new opportunities as they arise. So if a new opportunity arises that's consistent with the vision, it's perfectly okay to substitute new priorities for older ones. Now let me talk about a particular case study, and that's the internationalization of Yale over my 20 years of service. Here's what Yale looked like in 1993 on the internationalization front. Stunningly, only 2% of our undergraduates were international. That's just amazing to me to think of today in this world. But this was true not only of Yale, it's true of Princeton and a lot of the leading institutions, Stanford and other leading institutions. There were many graduate students from abroad in 1993, but very few undergraduates. Less than 25% of international students across all schools had financial aid. That number was even lower in some of the professional schools. Less than 10% of undergraduates had an opportunity to go overseas in some kind of Yale-sponsored program. So we weren't bringing students in any numbers, and we weren't sending students out in any numbers. Now, we did have dozens of exchange programs and research collaborations, largely set up by faculty members, but they were entirely uncoordinated and unpublicized. And the number was dozens, not hundreds or thousands. So how do we articulate a vision? Well, I started right at the beginning in my inaugural address in 1993. I identified the need to educate students for a globalized world. And I did that. I argued that that was because there were for three reasons. One, that the world, even at that time, and really 1994 was the year the internet really took off. So this is before the internet as we know it today. I argued that the world is becoming highly interconnected. We had, back in those ancient days, we had email. We just didn't have the web. The world is becoming highly interconnected. That careers would become increasingly global. And most importantly, and perhaps most originally, that leadership in a globalized world requires the capacity for cross-cultural understanding. So this is a big part of the vision, that a true 21st century education requires not just math literacy, not just language literacy, not just critical thinking, but also an ability to empathize with people from different backgrounds who have a different set of values and who see the world in a different way. Because negotiating a complex world among people with great differences in their backgrounds and understanding is going to be part of the future for any leader. So cross-cultural understanding needed to be built into not only the curriculum, but also the experience of students. So how do we move then to long-term objectives? Well, we went then to three particular long-term objectives. The first was to attract, and by the way, it was about a 5-year lag before we really started this. In the first 5 years at Yale, in my tenure, we had other priorities that needed to be attended to first. And I won't dwell on that, but it was about 1998 that we really started in earnest to move what I'd said in my inaugural address into reality, to take the vision and translate it. The goals we identified in 1997, 98 were, one, attract more international students to Yale, sort of obvious. The second was prepare students for global leadership and service, and that meant internationalizing the curriculum, both in terms of its content and internationalizing the curricular opportunity for students by getting them overseas for study or work experience. And then the third goal was to invest in international teaching and research programs of consequence, meaning programs that would have an impact on the world, that would be highly visible, would be associated with Yale's name, and would help us achieve the other two goals. Would help us effectively become better known, attract the very best students from abroad and faculty worldwide. The third principle, I'll remind you, was developing and communicating a strategy. We spent about 3 years engaging faculty and deans to identify near and long-term goals. And then finally in 2001, on the occasion of Yale's Tercentennial, we announced what we call the Global University Strategy as our key and central initiative at the initiation of Yale's 4th century. By the way, we then published reports every 4 years, as it turned out, that detailed the progress we'd made toward the 3 or 4 year goals we'd set out before and set a new set of priorities for the years ahead. And we continued that right through to the end of my tenure, and I believe was continued again in 2017 by my successor. Execution was the principle number 4. I found I had in hand a single empowered leader, Linda Lorimer, a remarkable woman, super administrator, who had helped me with earlier initiatives and with later initiatives, but basically took charge of the internationalization effort. She worked with deans and directors, and we insisted that all deans and all directors of major programs included international initiatives in the annual goals that they set for their schools and programs. And we maintained throughout ceaseless communication to keep people engaged and to continue to get buy-in to the internationalization plan. The results were part of execution. And I'll do that, I'll just pass very quickly over these, but it worked. From starting in 1997, we began to increase international student admissions to Yale College. We went from 2 to 12% over the period of the next 15, 16 years. We introduced full funding for all PhD students. So no matter where in the world you came from, if you're in the PhD program, you got a completely funded stipend and living expenses covering your, as well as tuition covering your expenses for up to 6 years. In 2000, we became the first undergraduate college, and I'm very proud of this, to admit international students on a need-blind basis and meet their full financial need. So whereas, as you saw before, fewer than 25% of international students were able to receive financial aid, which meant we were selecting for wealthy students and not for necessarily the best and brightest from abroad. Today, 75% of international students get financial aid, and about 60% get full rides, that is 100% scholarships. In preparation of students for global leadership, the second big objective, second big goal, we expanded overseas study fellowships going back to '97. We introduced a whole slew of new professorships, first in 2001, but then a succession of other initiatives, such as the India Initiative, which some of you are familiar with, where we created about 20 new faculty positions in the study of South Asia in the middle of that decade. And that's been an extremely successful program, built up great strength in the study of South Asia at Yale. Perhaps most important for the lives of undergraduates, we guaranteed every undergraduate at least one funded overseas study or work opportunity. Students don't like to leave Yale in the mid-year, so they tend to cluster these experiences in the summers. But many students get more than one, and about 80% of students get at least one. It's available to all. But our students are going abroad now and learning about cross-cultural empathy from their actual lived experience. And in 2010, we founded a new institute for global affairs that offered courses university-wide. We found that we had a number of notable research programs that have inspired work in other countries as well as at Yale. We now have hundreds, probably 1,000 or more international research collaborations compared to a number that was at least one order of magnitude smaller a decade earlier. And we set up some notable teaching programs. Among these, the World Fellows Program, which is probably the premier fellowship program of its type that takes mid-career leaders from around the world and brings them to Yale for a semester. It may maintain a network through the rest of their careers. And we've had some amazing alumni who, like the leading environmental writer in China, the leader of the opposition in Russia, are all graduates of the Yale World Fellows Program. We had programs for training government leaders and university leaders in Asia. NAVEEN Jindal knows well about the India Parliamentary Leadership Program. He attended the first cohort of students to come to that program, which was very well received by the parliamentarians, and they found that outside of the Indian political cauldron, they were able to actually talk to one another and actually build some shared ideas when they were away from home, sort of let their guard down and be a little more forthcoming instead of posturing in a partisan way with one another. So very successful program. And there are now thousands of overseas learning opportunities for students that I'm very proud of that result. And then I talked about being flexible and seizing new opportunities. And while I won't go into this in detail, but we founded Yale-NUS College in Singapore when the National University of Singapore came to us with an opportunity at no expense to us to create a world-class liberal arts college in Asia. At this moment, which was right in the middle of the financial crisis, the opportunity to do something really imaginative and ambitious with no financial cost was overwhelmingly attractive, and it completely fit our vision of cross-cultural understanding as a cornerstone of 21st century education. And the college is designed with education in mind. It's not a research institution. This faculty do research, but there are no departments and there's no balkanization of the curriculum. There are only 14 majors and there's a common curriculum. 12 of the 32 courses students take are taken in common with everyone in the class. Very successful undertaking. So let me so that summarizes in a way the internationalization objective. You see, I stuck to the playbook and followed the 5 steps I'm mentioning, and I believe we did a reasonable job of getting to the objective we set out the beginning. This one's harder to call because this transformation is truly in progress. I tried to have a hand in it when I went and spent 3.5 years as the CEO of Coursera, and we helped move things along, I think, a great deal, but nothing has been more successful at moving along online education than the disaster of 2020, than the COVID-19 experience. I think it's proven to us that online education is here to stay. I think truly the facts that demonstrate it were really developed over the last 10 years with companies like Coursera and edX and Udacity that have provided all kinds of tools that allow online learning to be effective, a lot more effective than just giving a lecture over Zoom. I mean, Coursera courses are a lot richer than that, and many universities are moving with their own teaching and learning operations to try to create courses like that should we need to be online in the coming year. But one of the big discoveries of online education from outside the university, from Coursera point of view, is that it did some dramatically different things to what universities can be. That is to say, universities don't have to concern themselves only with their residential student population. They don't have to reach only 10,000 or 12 or 15,000 students that they have on campus. They can reach mid-career learners everywhere throughout their lifetime. Stanford University today has about 16,000 students on campus. It's reached over 5 million students on Coursera. It's a totally different scale that you have at your grasp. Online tools also give you the opportunity to be very flexible and creative on campus. And you know about the idea of blended learning and the idea of using the online materials as a supplement to what you do live and combining them to create an even richer learning experience for on-campus students. What's just coming into sight now is, and there's some pioneers in India that have done this, is using at some scale and with some seriousness imported courses from other universities. So the entire Coursera catalog, for example, was given away for free to any university that signed up during the course of this pandemic, and over 1,300 universities in India have actually signed up to use our catalog, and a number of them are using it to give 4-credit courses to the students while shut down. So there's a lot of opportunity, I think, to move beyond. The bottom line is you can do the one thing that will unlock the move to lower cost education without reducing quality. The biggest constraint on cost in the university is that productivity has not changed in 100 years. Faculty still meet classes of roughly the same size. The faculty-student ratio is about the same as it was 100 years ago. That's not true. Labor productivity has gone up in as Chancellor Jindal will tell you, in every industry, labor productivity rises, not here. However, online gives you a chance to do that. If you can teach millions of students now instead of thousands, you can achieve reductions in cost that will lower the cost of education for all, for your residential students as well as others. So my final plea to you is get ahead of the curve and reimagine your university. Articulate a vision for online education, set ambitious but achievable goals, develop and communicate a strategy, execute on that strategy, and stay flexible and seize unanticipated opportunities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, President Levin, for that fascinating and indeed visionary lecture. In fact, many things that you said resonated and it indeed resonates with many institutions around the world. And you have been a leader par excellence in not only having the vision, but also working towards executing that. We have already received over 25 questions, so I'm going to pick up a few of them and ask you. So there's a lot of talk in India about the new education policy. The national education policy was released just a few days ago, and many educationists have welcomed it, including myself. So the question is, in what ways do you think international collaborations with Indian universities by institutions around the world will be enhanced with the introduction of the National Education Policy 2020?
Well, I think it's a landmark breakthrough. I'm so delighted to see the reforms that have been introduced. These are long overdue. I remember talking with the Minister of Human Resource Development back in around 2005 about many of these ideas. So some of the thoughts have been kicking around now for a long time, opening up to international collaboration, allowing private universities to form more easily as now is possible, the last few years has now been possible. And the flexibility and openness, getting rid of some of the rigidities in the system, all very welcome. I read the draft policy a year ago. I haven't read the new policy that was just issued, but I did, Raj, read your excellent summary and gloss on the policy. And it does appear that the draft policy was pretty much became the final policy, at least in terms of the big ideas. And I think it's very, very welcome. I think it will help stimulate partnerships. It'll make it much easier for international universities to negotiate partnerships here. And I think you probably see, a new surge in those partnerships without necessarily overwhelming the very excellent initiatives that we see. I mean, so many interesting private universities have been founded in the last few years. I mean, I sort of keep tabs on them, and I have friends and nearly all of them, and I'm really heartened by the developments.
Thank you very much, President Levin. There's, of course, a lot of questions about the online education itself. I must say that just around the time when India got hit with pandemic, we set up our own Office of Online Education and Digital Learning. And believe it or not, a few weeks ago, we launched 2 master's programs in, as you rightly said, within those few weeks, we've had over 250 student enrollments. So it's quite extraordinary that, and this is just, we were just trying to see whether there is such a appetite at all. But there are lots of concerns surrounding the pedagogy, but also the larger reputation surrounding online education. So how do you address that issue from the standpoint of learners? And equally, some questions have talked about the difference between undergrad education, in which online becomes more challenging as opposed to more graduate and professional education.
Well, I think that's everything you said. I more or less agree with. There's challenges, for sure. Let me give you a few examples. It's a couple of themes. One is, it is true, graduate. If you're talking about degrees, earning degrees, graduate students, they know what they want, particularly professional degrees. People want the credential, and they are willing to tolerate essentially less dramatic performative experience from their professors than undergraduates who tend to want more expression and more engagement. So I think it's true, we've seen a bigger takeoff in graduate degree programs than undergraduate. But it also, what's also a little distorted, I sort of alluded to this, in the recent experience post-COVID, is most universities just went on to Zoom. And actually, if you have a small discussion class of 10 or 15 people, and you can see everybody's face, and it's really not a lecture course, but truly a seminar, it works, or a law school course with a small class, basically, which is Socratic usually in method. Those work fine. I mean, they actually are not much different from being in the classroom. What can fail easily is the lecture format, which can be very tedious and boring if all you have is a talking head for an hour. It's for this reason, I think, that some of the early Indian ventures into online education, such as the NPTEL series of lectures that the IITs put together, they were, let's be honest, they were deadly boring at the beginning. I mean, they were mostly just one person standing there, talking and maybe scribbling on a blackboard or a whiteboard or something. It was not very satisfactory from the video participants' point of view. If you look at a Coursera or edX course, you'll see that we do a million things to avoid that, those doldrums. We don't use talking head videos very much. And even when we do, we interrupt them every 6 minutes with an exercise or a quiz or some active engagement of students in order to liven up the experience and actually improve learning. There's a lot of learning research that says that unbroken attention, even in a live lecture, you learn better if the professor breaks it up with opportunities for discussion in the midst of the class. So there are ways to make the online experience much better. There's now 8 or 10 years of research on what technique, what works and what doesn't work, and the universities that are new to this post-COVID, need to become aware of all that. And a lot of it, I won't try to be too commercial, but we've got a lot of courses on Coursera about how to teach online. So you might actually recommend those.
We are, of course, coming to the end of this session. There are questions about the situation that is posed by COVID, but partially because of the reluctance on internationalization on account of financial issues. Many universities in the West, particularly in Australia, in Europe, and of course in the UK, even the US, which have been dependent on tuition fee revenues of international students, are facing significant challenges. So is this going to affect and impact internationalization? And equally important is to what extent all these other forms of exchange programs and things like that will be impacted in the near future?
Well, we're going to have a terrible year. The year ahead, the academic year ahead, is going to be a disaster, and we should be in disaster mitigation mode because, so many international exchanges are going to be canceled. In many countries, travel is going to be restricted and prohibited. I think, India and China, which supply the largest numbers of international students to the United States, we expect many of those students, a great majority, may not show up. I mean, we know already that many Chinese students are not going to get visas when the fall semester begins. And I'm not sure about the status of India right now. When lockdown was underway, that looked like India wouldn't be able to come. Indian students wouldn't be able to come either. But so I think that there'll just be a lot less international movement this year. I think the momentum towards international collaboration is so strong, and the reasons to do it are so compelling that once we have a vaccine, once we have we're out of the worst of this disease, and that might be the academic year 21-22. Let's hope so. We'll go back to robust exchanges. In the meantime, financial fragility of institutions that are relying on tuition, even domestic students. The U.S. has many institutions that are totally tuition driven, and if they have to shut down again, they're many of them are threatened with essentially existentially may not survive. In universities that are state supported, hopefully the state will do things to keep their institutions going.
Thank you, Rick. Joanna, there's one question for you with regard to the role of ACU in engaging with these 50 countries and universities there at a difficult time when issues relating to access and affordability will become even more difficult, with many people losing jobs and their ability to pay to study in universities abroad. What could ACU do and contribute to that conversation?
We've been looking at how we can repurpose our mobility grants into virtual mobility grants. And in fact, we've just had our first virtual summer school in Ghana, where students from across the Commonwealth were selected to go and do a course on refugees and migration with the academic staff there. And we repurposed that summer school so that it was still a rich experience. Rick talked earlier about we lose something from virtual in the sense of the casual contacts and the networking, but we've done quite a lot to try to create those opportunities as well. And in some ways, given the situation that many students are in across the Commonwealth, mobility is quite an expensive option. And virtual mobility is also not a bad substitute. It is not the same thing, but actually the cultural understanding one gets from virtual mobility, the ability to do different courses and meet different people still exists. And so we firmly believe in encouraging those connections. And again, we've been able to have meetings with our East African and South African committees, with our Australian Pacific committees where everybody shows up and you get very rich conversations that you cannot have in the real world. So I think that it is going to be an incredibly tough year ahead for institutions and for individuals. I think that there are innovative ways that universities can reach out to governments and private companies to ensure that everyone has access to data and everyone has access to a Creative Commons. For example, University of South Pacific are creating centres in shopping centres where students can go to get connected if they can't get connected in their homes. So there are ways, I think, that we will be working with our network to ensure that all of our universities over the next year and all those student communities can continue to learn online and reap the benefit of organisations like Coursera that have really pioneered online learning and are now seeing, to an extent, the fruits of what they've been doing over decades.
Thank you, Joanna. We'll have the last question for Rick. Rick, this is a question from me. Let's assume the Prime Minister of India is hearing this, and there is a lot of impetus to transform and reimagine Indian higher education system. What would be your piece of advice to him?
Well, the first piece of advice would be execute the plan. I mean, execute. Now, you spend a lot of time developing this plan. Now do it. I mean, it isn't always automatic in India that when you have a plan, you do it. So I think it's important that the resources be put behind it so that the aspirations can be realized. And that probably means incremental government resources to support things like online education, so that universities whose budgets are otherwise tight might have let's face it, the state schools, unless things have changed markedly under Modi, and I just don't know, but the state schools operate under pretty considerable resource scarcity, and actually tooling up to do online well requires hiring instructional designers, having first-class video equipment, and building labs for teaching and learning. Those the resources should be there for those investments.
Thank you very much, President LEVIN. We have, of course, come to the end of this program. I have great pleasure in inviting my colleague, Professor SRIDHAR PATNAIK, Registrar of OP Jindal Global University, to deliver his concluding remarks and vote of thanks.
Thank you very much, Professor Rajkumar. Honorable Chancellor, Mr. NAVEEN Jindal, and members of the Chancellor's family, members of the JGU governing body, Professor Richard Levin, Professor JOANNA NEWMAN, and Vice-Chancellor Professor Rajkumar, distinguished panelists and invitees from India and around the world, and faculty members from different universities in India and even other universities from around the world. Good evening, everyone. It's been a fascinating session listening to everyone on this particular panel. And on this special and joyous occasion, it's indeed my privilege to deliver the concluding remarks. As we all know, today is the birth anniversary of Shri O.P. Jindal and Founders Day of the O.P. Jindal Global University. Many of you are aware that we hold our convocation on 7th August every year. So although we miss the celebrations, I take this opportunity to congratulate our graduates. As observed by the Chancellor, Mr. NAVEEN Jindal, the disruptions caused by COVID-19 this year has given us an opportunity to mark the day in a unique manner by bringing together the educational leaders from India and abroad to address higher education challenges and opportunities. In fact, the conference is a befitting tribute to Shri Om Prakash Jindal, who remained a vociferous champion of education for all, and in particular, education for the girl child, economic, social, and human development. The conference addressed some of the challenges of women's leadership in higher education. Shri Om Prakash Jindal always believed that education, access, and opportunities could change the world so that students can go on to become change makers, as even observed and championed by our Chancellor, Mr. NAVEEN Jindal. And aptly so, considering education as a public good, the conference advocated the need to take a more integrated approach to research, teaching, and community service in the context of the Sustainable Development Goals. In a way, Shri Om Prakash Jindal reimagined the importance of education, an idea that resonates with the theme of this evening's Founders Day lecture, which is our earnest effort to recognize and commemorate the ideals and philosophy of Shri Om Prakash Jindal, under whose name the university was established and has today acquired a very well-deserving reputation globally. We are indeed very grateful to our benefactor, our Chancellor, Mr. NAVEEN Jindal, for establishing the university and for his unflinching support and continuous guidance. As you all would agree, the university, the OP Jindal Global University, stands a testament to values espoused by Shri Om Prakash Jindal. We are also privileged to have Professor Richard Levin, former President Yale University, to deliver the keynote address and the Founders Day lecture this evening. We are also honored to have Professor JOANNA NEWMAN, who delivered the presidential address. In fact, their ideas are inspirational, thoughtful, and enriching, wherein they have emphasized the potential role that JGU and India could play in internationalization of higher education, multi-level engagement, and its contribution to progressively building a knowledge society. It's noteworthy to mention that Professor Richard Levin's presentation is truly a masterclass to all educationists and educational leaders. And we are also glad to recognize the efforts of Professor Levin and Professor NEWMAN, who continue to be great supporters of our university. As it was mentioned during the course of this session, we at the Jindal Global University had the opportunity to host them on numerous occasions. They always believed in our vision and supported us in our journey. As the Vice-Chancellor remarked, and even the Chancellor had observed, Professor Levin's participation at the OP Jindal Global University's joint conference with Yale University in 2010 is indeed truly remarkable, because those were the early days when JGU was at its infancy, and many thought that the idea of a global university in India is still a pipe dream. But thanks to the efforts of the Chancellor, today the university rightfully has its place in the global world university rankings. I sincerely thank Professor Levin and Professor NEWMAN for joining us this evening and sharing their ideas and for their continuous support. I also take this opportunity to sincerely thank our Honorable Chancellor, Mr. NAVEEN Jindal, for his dynamic and visionary leadership, and our Vice Chancellor, Professor Rajkumar, for steering the university's efforts towards academic excellence. I wish to thank members of our Academic Council, Board of Management, and governing body of JGU for their participation this evening. I wish to also sincerely thank Madam Savitri Jindal and family members of the Chancellor, the Vice Chancellor, and other dignitaries for their participation in today's Founders Day lecture. I also take this opportunity to thank all our conference partners, the Qatar Foundation, LASPOW, Star Scholars, Grupo Coimbra, Association of Indian Universities, and Association of Commonwealth Universities, and leaders of national and international agencies, all speakers, panelists at the conference, and members of our university administration in particular, and also the faculty members and student interns of the International Institute for Higher Education Research and Capacity Building at JGU, and the Office of the Vice Chancellor, and the Office of Information Technology, Office of Communications, and all staff members for their untiring efforts to make this conference and the Founders Day lecture a grand success. I wish to also thank all the distinguished guests who have accepted our invitation and participated in the Founders Day lecture. I might have missed few other individuals who have supported us in this endeavor. In all earnest, I wish to be forgiven for not specifically expressing our gratitude, but we wholeheartedly acknowledge the efforts of everyone. Last but not the least, before I close my remarks, I would like to just take a moment to express my personal thoughts about what the program that we had conducted over the last 2 days truly symbolizes. And it truly symbolizes what it is mentioned in Japanese as Ichigo Ishai moment, which is a Japanese idiom. And as part of the Japanese culture, it states we must value each moment like a beautiful treasure. And to us, this conference and the Founders Day lecture is indeed a very unique moment that had given us an opportunity to meet. But for the COVID disruption, probably we would not have an opportunity to meet in this particular setting, and wherein the scale of the conference is truly large, and the nature of the conference and the mode of the conference. And we all might meet again, but this is indeed a beautiful moment because it all culminated in the Founders Day lecture and even the celebration of the birth anniversary of Shri Om Prakash Jindal. Thank you all once again.
Thank you very much. This conference and this program is ended. Thank you so much.